Hello, YouTube. It's Ewan Jones. I'm joined today by Rod, and we're going to be discussing anti-feminism, men's rights, traditionalism, and Christianity. And we're going to be looking at the connection between the anti-feminist and men's rights movement and this idea of possibly moving back to a more traditional society and maybe under the guiding system or religion of Christianity. So, Rod, what do you make of that premise? Do you think that there's something emerging right now, within, because we've had the anti-feminist movement, the men's rights movement, and it seems that Christianity and traditionalism are re-emerging now. Do you see that that's happening? Is it, or
Yeah,
go
it is.
from there, Tom? Okay.
It is happening. People are looking for their roots, especially with everything that's been going on from the riots in the streets and everything else, and the fact that our governments have been so dishonest with us for so long and haven't actually given a damn about the native people. And people are looking for their roots, and they want wholesomeness in their lives. They don't want their children beaten up by immigrants or raped. They want to be around nice people, and even it wouldn't matter if the immigrants were westernized, then that's fine. But if they're completely alien to our way of life, then that's a problem, because they very well might be quite hostile towards us. And our police, they haven't been protecting us. The courts haven't been protecting our children. And the education system has completely betrayed our generation, quite a few generations of people. I don't think there's been a proper education system for working class white lads since about the 1960s, because they changed everything, the way they educated children in the let's say the mid 1960s, when I was a child in the early 70s. And most of the teachers, when I was a child, were feminists, and feminism was big back in the early 1970s in New Zealand. I think Christianity needs to change, because it was, like I was saying about with the Catholic schools, the religious schools, so much of it was about punishment. I talked to older people all around my age, and they went to religious schools, and they were given thrashings all the time. It was never talking about community. It was never talking about the family, and weddings were all about the wedding dress and the woman, and the funeral, when the husband eventually dies, or if she doesn't divorce him, then that's also about her. There was no real place for the man except for being a prop to pay for it all. Yeah, and that's not what family and Christianity should be about. And the white people have not been looking after their children. And the people on the right might not like me saying that, but I come from a very dysfunctional family. An awful lot of white children, the families have not been dedicated to their children. They haven't focused on the children, and they never had the same by their boomer parents.
Yeah.
And what the way the education system is, children are coming out of a bad education, quite confused, not even knowing what gender they are, and they don't have the skills to be able to do business. And handle money, and all the rest of it, all the things that are supposed to, which made our countries wealthy, having a strong working class and small business people. So yeah, people are going back to their roots. I mean, everything's against us. You can't even watch a bloody movie without them sticking in some political correct thing or some nod to Marxism or feminism.
There's spoken about this before. I think this is the emergence of the new woke religion, and I believe it's kind of like Christianity, except it's absolutely terrible and completely evil and has zero redeeming qualities. So, this is a new Marxist woke religion that includes radical feminism, includes all of the trans nonsense, includes critical race theory, and
Mm.
all of the other Marxist identity politics narratives that we've seen. So yeah, it's you know, it
Critical.
seems that we're replacing the old good religion with this new horrific religion.
Well, they did it in Russia. They did it in China.
Mm-hmm.
The critical theory, everything's equal. Nothing's equal. You look at the universe. Nothing in this universe is equal. We're not even equal to ourselves. And all you need to do is talk to a performer or an athlete, and they know they're not equal to themselves a lot of the times, to their best times or their best work. It has been a very successful attack on the male in our culture, because without the man, the culture collapses, because the man has responsibilities. Working class women who work, based, they're responsible, hardworking. But so many women now are just status driven, and they wouldn't know how to do a hard day's work.
Mm-hmm.
And
Sorry.
Go
on. You brought up initially a lot of the, I guess, downsides of what we're seeing happening now. So you brought up the riots, and were you referring to, I guess, what we've been seeing in the US this year and also in the UK with the Black Lives Matter movements? And yeah.
Ripping down statues because the person it represents may have had slaves, but then again, he also may have been part of stopping slavery. A lot of them were, and it was in a different time. And we've also, as we've moved through and learning more, we've learned an awful lot more about the cultures in Africa and the slave cultures in Africa, like the Bantu. They were a slave culture. They enslaved everybody. The Khoisan were enslaved. We now have 250,000 pygmies enslaved in Africa now. No one gives a damn.
In
and the slave markets in
Democratic Republic of Congo, isn't it, where they're enslaving these pygmies, isn't it, I believe?
250,000, and no one gives a stuff.
Yeah.
It's like, oh my God. And these people are calling us it was a few Christians who wanted to put an end to slavery, and it was our culture, the only culture we know of. There may have been others that put an end to slavery, and the bill was paid off in 2014, apparently.
Yeah.
It's astounding, and yet we get the blame for it. And the reason we get the blame is because we've got a conscience.
Yeah. I think with the all of the woke movements, I'd say what they're doing. I mean, there's a number of like really bad narratives that we're seeing play out here, but it seems to be that it's promoting division between individual groups of people, and whether it's men and women or white, Caucasian people and black people, and it's saying that there's a massive division here. And one group is the oppressor, the other group is the oppressed, and the oppressed need to rise up against the oppressor. And, then it seems to legitimize rioting and violence and that sort of thing. And, and it seems that if we compare this to the Christian movement that, was helped keep the people of Great Britain and all of its, like these lands together for thousands of years, that was a religion that brought people together, that helped to establish the local community. And, it actually got people to come to church, and they would sing together, and they would pray together and worship together. And so that was a constructive process of building up friendships and bonds and relationships. And to me, it just seems that, right from the outset, one of the main objectives of the new social justice religion is to destroy all of those bonds, is to ruin the relationships between people. Would you agree with that?
I think what's utterly ridiculous about the whole thing is the people behind all of this are the most oppressive people of all. You've got these these people with billions and trillions who are behind this. You got the usury. I mean, I think the teachings of Jesus was a direct hit against usury and slavery and all these other things. Christianity was a peculiar thing to begin with. There were many different things which they decided to drop, didn't they? But the teaching of Jesus are the things that stayed. I mean, treating others how you would be treated yourself. I've got neighbours above me where I live, and they're foreign people. See, I come from we're liberal. And when I do things, I think about the people below me and the people around me. So I've got to be considerate.
Yeah.
These foreign people are considered victims and all the rest of it, but they're not liberal at all. They don't have a liberal cell in their body. They don't give a damn about anyone else.
Yeah.
And this is the conflict that we're getting now. And I would be seen as the oppressor, yet I'm the liberal person that wouldn't behave, that would take into account their rights. But they would seem to never do that for me. And living in London in flats, the worst flats I've ever lived in, have had foreign people, mainly Muslims, and the noise is unbelievable. And when you say to them, do you mind I'm working, I've got to go to bed at this time, they just look at you like I've even been called kafir many years ago, back in the 90s.
Yeah.
And you say to them, look, I've got to get up to work. If you have all your friends around and you're moving furniture around and yelling and everything, I can't sleep. And they just look at you like you're rubbish. And this is the problem. And yet our society says, well, white men and their privilege and all the rest of it. What privilege?
I'm not really seeing it. Yeah.
No, well, having responsibility over others is a privilege. But see, we're even with many women, it's the same thing. With many of these feminist women, they're supposed to be liberal. Many in the 90s, I worked in a design company. The feminist women there was nothing liberal about them. They were militant, radical, man-hating feminists. But they were dependents as well, and I've mentioned it with you before. The militant dependents. You were there to serve their every need, and yet then they'll tell you, "Well, I'm not your servant. You're not going to hold me down." There was never any intention of me wanting to hold them down and make them do what I wanted and make them run around for me. It was them that were making me, and I was a young man back then, and I had my life utterly ruined by a load of upper class, spoilt women who one had a flat in Earls Court and a country house in Wales, and she drove a car. I couldn't even afford a bloody car.
Right,
who are these people?
Yeah, I think what you're highlighting there is that there is this kind of ethos of generosity and magnanimity that exists within people of a Christian background and Christian faith, and it's still there, I think, now in the culture, but equally, with these cultural Marxist movements, with these identity politics movements, they thwart all of that. These movements just go against that. They tell you that actually it's okay to be rude to other people, it's okay to use other people, it's okay to be aggressive towards others, it's okay to ostracize others, just all of these negative behaviors. And I think it's indicative of a society that is collapsing, that is actually in free fall now. And I think it's with this new woke religion, it seems to me that it is just based around a lot of these negative character traits, and the result of that over time is that communities become more and more fractious, and they just don't exist anymore. Instead, it's just people clambering over each other, trying to get to the top, and kicking each other in the face as they try to raise to the top. Whereas if we compare that with the Christian system we used to live in, I think it is it was a system that was entirely based around community. And I'm a Christian. I'm practicing Christian. I go to church, and one of the things about actually going to church is that you have your community who you go with, and you can't ostracize people there. You can't be rude to other people there. because if you are, then you'll get found out, and that's not the overall ethos of the place. You know, the ethos is that we admit that we are all sinners. You know, we all make mistakes, and we all have a touch of evil about us, and we're essentially we're not good. We can do good. We can reach towards goodness. We can reach towards Jesus and his teachings, and you know we can try to follow him. And I think you know that actually kind of eating humble pie in that way, and also you know the general ethos that exists in the place. I think it's something that really helps preserve community. And you know you're part of a local community, and anyone is invited. You know there's none of this exclusivity about it. Like anyone can just walk in, and as long as they wish to repent and to follow the Lord, anyone can just walk in off the street to do that. And so I think it's an establishment that reaches out to people, and you know is there to help them. And I think that that's just in complete contrast to this new hedonistic liberal society that certainly that I grew up in and has been surrounding me my entire life. And I'm really glad I started going and to church, because it's I don't know, for me it just seems that it has all of these positive qualities that I wanted there to be in the world. But you know, in this liberal society that you know I was part of, that I've been part of, I think just a lot of these positive qualities aren't there. So I'd like to see what you make of that.
I think one of the interesting things is that other cultures who have got an in-group preference, they're nice to their people as well. But how they treat outsiders is another thing again. And this has been the downfall of Christianity, because we treat others as we would our community. And we're going to be forced into changing, which doesn't sound very Christian, but many people have been treated as, oh, well, Christianity, a lot of our culture, we've been treated like suckers. A lot of people who come to this country, I mean, other countries, most people who have got a grounding in their country, where they've got a family, they're running a business, or they're employed, they've got people around them, friends and that, they're not going to just turn up at another country with their hand out. The people who do that are the people who usually aren't as genuine, more likely to be opportunists. And a lot of these people, everyone assumes that they're these poor victims who've come over. A lot of them are pickpockets.
Right, right.
Scammers, the fraudsters, and they can be quite violent people as well. Certainly not everyone who comes here. Some people do come here out of war zones, but most of them are economic and welfare immigrants.
Yeah.
And they come here, and of course, it was a Christian culture, and the welfare and all the rest of it's still based around that. That's not going to last forever. But how we treat other cultures, we're not going to be able to treat them like they're our culture anymore, because they're not treating us like that, and they never have done.
Yeah, I think with the immigration situation into Britain, it's quite clear that I mean, whilst obviously there are lots of immigrants who are great people who come here, equally it seems there is a massive problem there of people coming over and it's like, what's going on? Why do you let this person in? What positive benefits does this person bring? I mean, I don't think there's any kind of reflection that's going on by our, the people in charge, by the government, of who they're letting in. It just seems to me that a lot of the people they're letting in are violent and are, extremely disruptive and, in some cases, quite crazy as well. And, there just isn't that focus on, maybe we shouldn't be letting some of these people in.
Well, I mean, we're now becoming the lower caste, white working class people who are not skilled. We're becoming the lower caste in our own society. And a lot of
Yeah,
other
yeah,
societies, even India, they enslave people. You've got the untouchables. I mean, we have a class system here, which is pretty horrible, but compared to the caste system, I think
yeah,
it's been a
yeah,
long time since it's been that bad. But we are, and a lot of our own people are in a wretched state, and there's no education system to pull them out. And the worst
yeah,
thing is that the people doing a lot of this, the you know, virtue signaling well-off older people who are near retirement now, they got all the benefits of a free education. They got
yeah,
all of the
yeah,
benefits of when the education system was changed to get working class people up the ladder. And
hmm,
now they're up there. They pulled the ladder up with them.
yeah,
And
yeah,
and and their children, they can afford, because of their success, to put their children into better places. And most of us, we're circling the plug hole on the way
hmm,
out. And of course, a lot of us now are getting older. I'm getting older. And we're in a really difficult situation. I remember talking to a woman once here, and she has a house, and she says,
mm,
"Oh, you
mm.
must sell your flat and come down here." And I said, "Well, I don't own my flat; it's a council flat." And so she went quiet, and then later on, she says, "No, you must sell your flat and come down here." She couldn't understand that somebody doesn't own their own place,
Was she
because all
early
her life
onset
she's been kept.
dementia or
No. She was a woman who's been kept all her life. She's
okay,
never
yeah,
really
yeah,
worked, I don't think. I can't see her
hmm,
being she didn't look like a working place person. So she's had different partners or a husband or whatever who's provided for her. She's got a house.
yeah, yeah,
And you can actually say to her, because you talk to her and she says, well, she's thinking, well, we're having a conversation. It's nice. He's obviously reasonable. So he's obviously respectable. So he owns his own place. Well, no.
No, I think now as well, for a lot of younger people here in the UK, they don't own their place, and it, yeah, like a number of things have been done to create this situation. One is that we have the rise of a landlord class who own
Oh, yeah.
hundreds, in some cases, thousands of homes, and
Mm.
so then there's an entire system of of renting them out as house shares, and for a lot of the younger generation, they're just living within this system, without earning enough to break out of it. And I mean, that's made worse by the fact that the job situation, well, I mean, now with coronavirus, it's absolutely ridiculous. I mean, it's just been completely destroyed with coronavirus. But even before then, I'd say certainly in a lot of the public sector industries that actually it's the workplace has become really unsettled, and fractious, and just kind of breaking apart, and there's not a lot of stable jobs within the system. And I think that was a deliberate movement that they instigated, the globalists. They made the workplace a more unsettled environment, so it was harder for people to get more stable long-term jobs. Then we've also had the generally the feminist movement and its desire to get men and women into the workplace, and then by doing that, there was this reduction of wages, and then there was this kind of increase in the cost for homes, and you needed the two wages in order to get the home. A lot of the time, you didn't need to before then. In the past, you go back to the 60s, 70s, it was much easier for the man to do a job and then get a steady job, and then be able to fairly quickly get a mortgage on a house, and you have that structure in place. And then there's a lot of women who would want to marry him, and you would have the entire system would be there. That was the structure that was in place in the past, but they seem to have gotten rid of all of that with a number of strategies that they've used, I'd say, just to make the housing situation a lot more fractious. And now, yeah, we have a lot of young men and women who are growing up and kind of going through, their whole life, it seems, within this rental system, and they're just generation rent. And
this is the same things happening with. I mean, you were talking about businesses. All these globalists, or people, these incredibly wealthy people, took the businesses out of Britain and took the manufacturing overseas, so they could make more of a profit for themselves, even though they were wealthy anyway. So it took all the money out of the British community. The workplace changed. So it used to be more about productivity. I mean, I've worked in places where institutions, which are completely more about status and all the rest of it. And a lot of people in them don't even know how to work. It couldn't completely corrupt, like a government department. But we now what happens, I've found, we've got a lot of women who come into the workplace and they want to change the workplace. It goes from productivity into about their rights. So you've got a human being who doesn't want to do the work. And because she's different, even though she's meant to be the same, she's demanding changes. So the cost of everything's going up, and she's not producing unless she's, those type of women don't produce the way that the men would have done. A good man would have done. There's plenty of men who don't work properly as well. But the cost has gone up. And we have a society now which is full of old ladies, which are property owners, who financially and emotionally rape their husbands, strip them of their wealth, strip them of their family, and they're now property owners, and they got rental properties, and they're living there like queens. They're doing better than their children. Often their children go down the plug hole. And so we've got, instead of everyone having money where they can do, if you're prepared to work, you'll get on, we've got a load of people who aren't prepared to work, who are living way above their means.
Yeah.
And they're still yelling for their entitlements to be met every time. What about all the young people, the men and women who come from where they couldn't afford the education, the parents couldn't, or the mother, the money was just sucked into her lifestyle and whoever she was with at the time, and now she's older, and she's still got the family around her, everyone's doing things for her. So
yeah.
And where's the father? I mean, he probably died years ago, and he in a bed sit with an alcohol problem. Or with that, if he's lucky enough, he married again and met another woman where he had other kids. The amount of bitching that goes on from women when the husband, after all that, is able to actually re-establish himself and then meets another woman and get a family back. The jealousy and the anger of women when they see that their husband is happy and he's met someone who's not like her. It's the selfishness, but the role models for this in our society. We're talking about the church and talking about the teachings of Jesus and about looking after other people and not being selfish and being grateful for your meal and being grateful for things. And that was so different to the society now, where our role models are these incredibly wealthy people who are financially enslaving society. And then they're paying for, they've got their own politicians that they pay for. And now we've got these career politicians who are getting on that bandwagon. They're all multimillionaires. And they prove that they're good people by being politically correct in their own mind. So they flood us with other people who are not prepared or not able to play the game the way the game used to be played. And the game's gone now. There's always been dodgy European white people as well, but people were still prepared to sort of play along. Now we've got in-group preferences of all different types, and everybody's fighting for their cause, except for the only ones who are not allowed to are actually the native people of this country.
I agree. Yeah.
Or any black or brown person who happens to actually see themselves as a Western person and is actually conservative. They get treated like crap as well.
I think the point you were making about generally about immigration and just linking that to housing. I think there's a huge issue here, because if you're talking about the rich immigrants, that, like, it's still a problem, because you're still like inviting all of these other rich people from around the world, and there's still only so much land to go around. So the inevitable result of that is that house prices go up, and you start marginalizing a lot of the local population. In other situations, they would have been able to afford the house, but if you're inviting the rich immigrants over, then they're not able to. The other situation.
Immigrants. I mean, we're being
the other situation, just to mention, is the welfare state as well. And with that, you know, you've got the situation where the government are taking massive amounts of tax money, and then they're allowing, say, a woman who is kind of would be destitute otherwise, and say has you know, 2 illegitimate children. They're giving her a house because she says, oh, you know, I couldn't manage otherwise. And so they go, okay, yeah, here's your house and we'll pay your bills for you. And then in that situation, it's better if the man isn't around, because if he is, then, you know, the government will say, well, actually, there's an earner with you now. You're living with this guy. He's earning some money from his job. Therefore, you don't need the house and you don't need your bills paid for. So I think it is victimhood money, the entire welfare system.
Also, it's punishing responsible people.
Yeah.
And irresponsible people are able to get a lot more help. I mean, it is complex. I mean, if the woman is destitute, say she's got drug problems, say she comes from a dysfunctional home, she's probably never going to function very well in life. But when you look back in our history, the slums that we had here in the cities were appalling. I mean, who wants to go back to that? The trouble is, there's no common sense. It's very, very hard.
And just to say on top of that, you then so you have the welfare state, which I think is an absolute abomination anyway. But then on top of that, you also have immigrants coming over, and then they're given houses within the welfare state. And, you know, the government starts saying, we're not going to give houses to the local indigenous population. Instead, we're going to give houses to all of these people who have just come over from Somalia or, you know, Syria or wherever. And then, you know, and then it gets even worse with all of the stuff that Nigel Farage has been showing us over the last year of them putting them up in all of these 4-star hotels as well. And it's like, this is complete madness. What, you know, and obviously I think it's...
Well, it's COVID, because no one would be able to have a holiday. Can you fancy saving your money, going on holiday, and then you're with a load of people from boat people who are all fighting and things. And they might all have the latest trainers and mobile phones and things, but I don't think it's going to be a very nice environment. And you're the only one who's paid for your room in the dining room.
Luckily I've avoided that situation.
Being mugged on the way to your room every hour or so. But I mean, people will say how deeply offensive and racist what I'm saying is, but the fact is no one gives a damn what actually happens to everyday people. And here in America, all over the world, in the Western countries. And we're being told that we're bad people. See, the welfare state was for the British people, or for the Australian people, or the American people. Once you start opening the doors on the world, you're going to get completely flooded. The thing is, the populations in other countries are so vast. There's no way you can really make a dent in it. One thing that Western civilization did was it didn't just enslave every other culture, unless you believe what the left tells you. It actually gave stuff back. The merchant class were often the most ruthless in the British Empire. They're the ones who actually did that. They were like the billionaires of today. They're the ones who people starved, even though they were working in paddocks and things, producing food, working on land, but they weren't allowed it. And this happened in India, and some horrific things happened. And then the money, all the food was being sent away on a train to be sold in a country that could afford it. Now that's an abomination.
Yeah.
The Christian values, our elites, our so-called elites, as we call them, the demons that have so much money and influence, they don't have any Christian values at
No,
all.
no.
They don't give a damn. And when we look into these other things, which a lot of people say it's conspiracy, but a lot of these top people involved in child trafficking, pedophilia, all these things, and trafficking people, women, men, young lads, girls, trafficking children. I mean, we've got that come to this country with people who are living on welfare or living in parts of Britain, who as soon as they got off the plane or the boat, they were grooming, as we call grooming children. No, it was organised rape, prostitution of children. In this of our country's children, and yet it still happens, and people still aren't outraged. Posh people are frightened to talk about it because it will make them look like a racist. I mean, talk about
it's pretty horrific. And I was just going to say about the I mean, it seems with the way the entire housing situation and the welfare state as well, you know, that those two systems, that it seems the way it's gone is it's all been geared towards ensuring that the next generation of British people, the ones who are actually going to work and, you know, trying to, you know, like live a good life, going to work every day, actually doing all of that, they're the ones who are struggling, and you know, they should be the ones who are doing well. It's those people who you want to honor, the ones who actually go to work, who are actually productive, members of society. But it seems that they're not the ones who benefit from all of that. Instead, it's the landlords, the immigrants, and also a lot of the people who were part of the welfare system, and that's a system that it doesn't value people who live a moral existence. Instead, it values dependence, as you pointed out, and you know, like overall from there, you don't get a next generation who grow up to be strong and healthy. Instead, you get a next generation who grow up within the welfare system, who, you know, are in these completely chaotic families. A lot of the children end up in the foster care system. You know, otherwise they end up in the mental health system, or they end up in jail. So you know, it's these seriously bad life outcomes. Or, you know, in the past they also used to end up on the Jeremy Kyle show as well. I don't believe that goes on anymore, but
show.
that was a you know, a common destination for a lot of the people who grew up in the welfare system.
Well, grotesque. Those shows are, they become grotesque, but they highlight. I mean, there's another thing. You're talking about people who are responsible and get on with things. In many respects, they're actually lucky. There's a lot of people who've grown up with a single mother, no father, or with maybe with different boyfriends and things she's got, in a completely deprived environment where there's no moral, nothing moral going on. I mean, I look at my own family and the attitudes of my sisters and things, and my mother. The whole reality was about undermining my father and having their secrets, doing this, doing other things. And in the end, and then you look at the behavior of a father who might behave badly. But when you've got all the women, including relatives, females, deliberately undermining the family, and my relatives did that to our family. We ended up in a children's home, me and my sisters, because of our friend of the family and my auntie. It was one of her greatest achievements, actually. And she had issues to do with money going back to her mother-in-law, which was my grandmother, because she thought she was due money, even though it wasn't her mother. She got money, but she wasn't happy with the amount. So she utterly destroyed a young family of dysfunctional parents. I mean, we didn't need any help to screw things up, my family. But with people like her who were well off in the background, and this whole culture of women undermining men and boys. And yet the women won't hear any of that. Most women won't hear it. All they can see is the fact that their feelings are important and their safety is important. They never look upon their and this is when you look at this whole thing, and it's to do with Black Lives Matter, you're not in any form able to question the behavior of the so-called person who's got themselves in trouble or got themselves in a situation. The continuous behavior. We know if we go out and we misbehave and we do things, or if the police ask us to stop, we start fighting with them, we tell them to fuck off, we start doing all these other things, we know what will happen to us. We'll get in trouble. Other people think, well...
Are you saying George Floyd wasn't an angel?
Yeah, well, he is now, apparently. I mean, the fact that George Floyd should be a role model should be embarrassing. I mean, there'll be a lot of black people who are very embarrassed by it, men and women. But I mean, it's on its head. But there's this whole thing about a persecution myth, and you're a victim of circumstances, and you're this and that. See, the thing is, there are people who are victims. They've been born into shitty families. A lot of these black boys, their mothers are quite violent. They have no male role model. They have nothing like that. That's not good. But what do? They follow Black Lives Matter, which is about shattering what's left of the black family, if there's anything left.
It's the the idea that you want to get into a violent confrontation with a police officer, and that's somehow going to solve your problems. I think generally, if you get into violent confrontations with police officers, I'd say as a strategy, that's not such a good one for going around about your day-to-day life. Also, it seems that there's the gangster culture, with its glorification of violence, and taking drugs and engaging in a violent lifestyle.
If you listen to the black community, the music industry was sabotaged. It wasn't like that. It was taken over by the people running the music industry, and they injected a lot of that crap into it as role models. It was more about expression, I think, in the past.
Well, it used to be pretty decent, blues music and soul music, wasn't it? And actually playing instruments and so on. And then it turns into
look at Motown,
all the hip hop stuff.
But everything in our society is going down the tubes, and it's funny because special effects and all the rest of it are so wonderful now, but it's meaningless because there's no proper storyline there anymore, and it's just injecting political correct little things in. I mean, they killed Star Wars, Doctor Who, all the things, and of course, when you look at Doctor Who, British Doctor Who, it was done so cheaply, and yet it was like a pantomime. There was no violence. It was the Doctor hiding behind things while Daleks, shot past. They didn't see where he was, where anyone else would.
Sure.
And the thing is, it had a storyline. It's just, and now they've got so much money to do it really well. It's political correct bullshit. And,
you're not going to get a good script if you're using the identity politics narratives. It's going to destroy the quality of the storyline, and absolutely, it's going to be a completely rubbish film as a result of that.
Well, this is why Generation Z, is it Generation X or Z? I can't remember.
I don't know now anymore. I'm not sure.
Generation X, I think. Oh, anyway. This is what happens when you get old and silly. What is it? This is why they don't have much time for it. And not only that, I mean, I had feminist teachers, and this is when I was in the 1970s. The boys and the girls have feminist teachers now, and they have these absolutely improbable creatures up there, especially when the kids are in a rough area and they got to deal with real bullying, not just feelings bullying, when they're going home from school. Or they get home and it's, and the drugs and all the rest of it. I mean, it is we're in difficult times, but the reason people are going to church because they want meaning. They want people there who they're going to look at and they can trust.
It is quite a turning away from all of the the identity politics narratives, and certainly it's a turning away from any kind of culture of victimization. And instead, you have the teachings of Jesus, and you have all of the wisdom that's in the Bible, in the Old and the New Testament, and it's just one timeless message after another, and all of the messages help you, and it's all fantastic, like amazing poetry as well, and just the morality of it is incredibly strong, and it's also beyond that. I think it's the the knowledge that like just that simple idea that we are sinners, and that we make mistakes and we're broken, and it's by reaching towards Jesus that we're able to do well in our lives. And if we work together as a community, and we all are aiming towards Jesus, and we're all we're watching each other's backs, and we're trying to make sure that that everyone else does well. And what we see is that's been the underlying foundation of our society here in the West, and that's been the case for the last 2,000 years. And I'd say it certainly beats the Black Lives Matter narratives, and any day of the week.
Well, the beggars with a stick with a nail through it, ready to hit you with it. And I mean, remember at Speakers, we had that girl who had the poshest accent you could ever bloody poke a stick at with a loudspeaker, and absolutely ridiculous. I mean, in the 90s, I worked I got a job in a design company because I'm good at making stuff. And I worked with designers who were all going to the shelter to help battered women, a lot of them. The best women I worked with were window dressers who were self-employed people who worked hard and fast and were clever and skilled. And they got no nonsense from some of them. But the design, so-called designers, I mean, they were absolutely appalling people. And the way I was treated as a young man, it completely ruined my health. And I'd never come to terms really with what had happened to me with my childhood. They were exactly the same people, even though it was across the planet and a different age away. But these women were just the same. This sense of vitriol, I suppose the term, and hatred. And this has been implanted in our society to shatter it. And I mean, we're going to have to start building up our own little societies and defending them. The government, at the moment, the government's silence is hardly there. Did you see that Dominic, what's his name, the health guy who was smirking away when he was on the television?
No.
When they had that. Oh, he could barely keep a straight face about the COVID stuff. He was pretending to cry. I mean, it was pathetic. He was laughing at us. I'm sure of it. They had some old boy called William Shakespeare who was in his 90s or something, and this guy couldn't. He was trying not to laugh. And this is meant to be a serious thing. On one hand, he tells us we've just lost 100,000 people today to COVID, and the next minute he's trying to stop laughing. These are supposed to be our leaders.
Yeah, and I would say with the COVID pandemic that I think I don't believe the numbers at all. I think it's they've just been attaching COVID deaths to a whole bunch of everyone who's dying, and they're saying, oh yeah, that was coronavirus, and they just increase the death tolls from there. And I mean, that's from what I'm seeing, that's been happening. And then so that's how they get to this 100,000 number, and it's really not that serious at all. But what I think it does is you have people who are basically you have people who are if they go along with all of everything they're being told, then they separate themselves from everyone else, and they isolate themselves in their own house. And they're no longer part of any of the communities that they were part of before, and all of these communities are being destroyed and ruined, and everyone is just completely isolated from everyone else. And I mean, this is such a terrible thing to do, because we are we're a small tribal species. In our hunter-gatherer days, before we created modern society, we lived in tribes as Homo sapiens of 150 members. And so this is who we are. And, I think if you look at the religions as well, then what you see with those is that we emulate a lot of the practices that we used as earlier hunter-gatherers. And, we do so now using religion as modern day humans. So for instance, ever since we were Homo erectus 1.9 million years ago, we would gather around the campfire and we would sing. And, so with religion, that's kind of what we do now. We go to church and we sing as a group. And, this is what we see in a lot of the other religions as well. And it's a community exercise that helps to bond the community, that helps to increase trust and love amongst all of the members. And I think, that's something that's absolutely vital to who we are. But then, you get the coronavirus pandemic coming along, and the government is telling everyone that they need to self-isolate in their own room and wear these masks and stuff. And the effect of doing that, of destroying the community and of removing people from each other, is that anxiety levels go up, because that's what would have happened to us back in our hunter-gatherer past if we were separated from the rest of the tribe, is our anxiety levels would go up. And, and they're doing the exact same thing to us now. And I think it exposes the fact that we are a tribal species. We've always been a tribal species. And I think, this psychological warfare that the globalists are involved in at the moment against, all of the human race through this coronavirus pandemic is absolutely disgusting. And it's it's just completely mentally, it's just destroying people.
They're trying to enslave us. And the thing is, as a community, we're isolated anyway. A lot of old people are on their own. And people say, oh, your poor old mother or your poor old father. With a lot of people, the mothers and fathers weren't good to them anyway. So why would they want anything to do with them, because of the breakdown of the family? So we're all isolated now. So maybe all this, with people not being able to afford things, to have their own home anymore or anything like that, well, maybe people are going to have to start living, and families are going to start focusing on each other more so than buying stuff and wanting to get the latest fashion and do this and that. Maybe they're going to have to start working. I mean, like maybe what you'd guess a traditional Chinese family is, although they're also having difficulties with it, the young people going into cities to work in factories. But and then people start working together. I mean, the family doesn't work together. My father used to say that to us. What are you watching TV for? He said, we're a family. And this was before things got really disturbing. But he was right in a way, but also we weren't a very good family. We weren't a happy family. So, yeah, the respect for men, the hate, the dislike for men, this incredible dislike and blaming of men. I mean, what's happening is children aren't having the love from the man because he's not considered part of the family. He's got no status. He's just thrown aside and mocked and things, or just used. So they're missing out on that. They're missing out on someone they could build up. I mean, this is what you do with your family. You're meant to build them up, and then they build you up. I mean, that's what communities do. So with all this awful stuff going on, where we're losing the quality of our life and all the rest of it, while these globalists are trying to enslave us, it might actually make people stronger, because we've been too comfortable. We're still too comfortable. I've been surprised where I've heard middle-class people actually talk about, know a little bit something that hasn't come from the mainstream media. I've been quite gobsmacked. And I thought, well, I knew this years ago, but you know it too now. And the fact that you know it really means something because you're not an outcast.
Right, yeah.
You're a responsible person, respectable person, and you know this thing, you know, this small item of information, which you'd expect them not to like to hear. It's a fascinating, awful a time we're going through, but we've got used to really awful changes happening to our society, which we never thought would happen. Yeah. And they're happening one after another, and it's going to keep getting quicker. And we're going to start the unbelievable. I mean, the fact with Speaker's Corner being closed.
Yeah.
Off and on. I mean, that you're not meant to close Speaker's Corner. All these different things, all high streets dead. You know, I mean, I don't know what the hell is happening to small business people everywhere.
It's not good. They're they're losing their businesses essentially, and I mean government borrowing as well. They're just printing off money like that like it's no one's business, so they can like continually furlough all of these people. And yeah.
But who are we borrowing the money off? The same people that are doing
they're just making it up out of thin air.
Yeah, but the people who are borrowing the money off are often the people behind a lot of these massive culture changing schemes.
Exactly, yeah.
And that used to sound like an incredible conspiracy, but people are beginning to realize now, they're starting to join the dots, looking at photographs, looking at old photographs, seeing the same people in them, and then reading about the devastating horror that was followed by decisions made by these people, and then the fact that they benefited from it and no one else did. All over the world. And now it's affecting the richest countries in the world, which is where we live. And we don't like it either. So it's time for change. And the church is part of that.
Yeah. I think, I'm hoping people just start thinking that they don't want to be part of the woke religion or the coronavirus religion, and actually they want to go back to the old religion of this country, which was Christianity, and they realize that it's much better to follow the teachings of Jesus and to have God as a higher ideal than the government, because it seems that there's a lot of pride in the government, and they seem to want to, they're playing the role of God now, aren't they? They're directing us, telling us what we can and can't do. And they seem to see themselves as masters of the universe. And, that they don't seem to believe in any higher authority. But I think it's necessary for a society, if the society does have this higher authority, who they're all looking to, who they all fear. And yeah.
Well, look at all the people, it doesn't matter, a great variety of different people who behave really badly and do a lot of harm. They do not believe they have anyone higher than them they can be held accountable to. This is where, even from just a practical point of view, having a religion to believe that there is a Father in heaven, you will be held accountable for what you do.
Yeah.
And a lot of us don't need that, because we know, well, if we do that, it's going to come back on us, and also hurting people is not nice.
Yeah.
We don't need to get off on hurting people, which the strange thing is, you're actually better than people who behave like that, but you don't feel like it when they can do what they like to you. You feel like a loser, but the fact is you're actually better than them.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. But I was going to say, just you brought up a point earlier, and it was that you think one of the things that turned people off the church was when there was too much of a focus on punishment, and I do think that was one of the issues, and also I think that there was where the church became too lax as well. So that's the church of affirmation, and I'd say what both. So this all revolves around the concept of original sin, and I think it works if it's there's kind of a sweet spot for this concept where we admit that we are all sinners, and that we need to repent for our sins, and if we do so, we will be saved. And it's by repenting for our sins, and it's by following the teachings and the moral guidance of Jesus that we'll actually do well in our lives, that we become good, and eventually that we get to heaven. So I think that's the best place to be. But then there's also the overly draconian way of seeing it, where people think that it's a good idea to start flagellating themselves with a whip or something because of the sins that they've committed. And that's taken to some ridiculous beliefs as well, where I think one of them was that people can store up sin credit by flagellating themselves, and that means that they can do something bad and then get away with it because they've already got so much sin credit that's that they've built up by hurting themselves. The other one is the one that I experienced when I was a child, when I was in school, and that was a conception of original sin where it was too weak-willed, where they didn't tell us that we were sinners. Instead, they mentioned that the old in the old biblical text, they mentioned that all of the people were born with original sin, and that Eve she ate the fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, and it was a bit misogynistic that they blamed this woman. And obviously the Bible was written a long time ago, and it was a bit of a misogynistic text. And that's the other version of it. And I think that leads to this version of Christianity where everyone says, we're all wonderful, all behavior is great, everyone is moral. And so that's the church of affirmation, I think. And I think that's equally as destructive as the when there's too much of a focus on self-punishment. And it's by kind of getting the original sin concept, it's by actually placing that in the correct, given that the correct place. That's how we do well. But I wanted to see what you made of all of that and how that's.
I think one of the problems is that Christianity has is the language that's being used, because you said yourself, we're all sinners and we're broken. It would be better language to say, well, we're imperfect. Because when you say we're all sinners, because a lot of the language that Christians use is really off-putting to Western people, because we've had such a long history of punishing people, and their grandparents or even their parents went to Catholic schools or went to religious schools, and it was just complete punishment and really bad stuff. It wasn't focusing on good stuff. You've got to focus, like you said, you've got to focus on both.
I think imperfect is too weak. Just to say, I think sinners and broken is better.
Okay, but I'm saying, as somebody who's not a practicing Christian, and my friend, his family became born again Christians in the 80s, and they were weird people, that lot. It was all focusing on the devil and turning the record back so you could hear the devil talking on heavy metal records and all this sort of stuff, the music, heavy metal. It was a focus on that. And it wasn't a focus on moving forward, having living a good life, but being a good person, building, growing, working towards the light and making other people's lives better, and listening to the teachings. Instead, it was focusing on things like sin and the devil and all these sorts of things. Sin is a thing. We are sinners. We do the things which are wrong. But even when I use that term, personally, I could be wrong, but I think that we need to change a lot of the terms that are used so that the Western people can actually listen to it, because it's off-putting, because we've just had such a bad experience. At Speaker's Corner, you've got the cowboy, who's there with his whistle and all that. It's cowboys like him which have screwed up Christianity. with his
Well,
terminology.
he goes on like a lot about creationism, and he ridicules anyone
Yeah, he
who
does, yeah,
believes
but
in
it's all about
evolution
the
as
devil.
well.
But the thing is, his talking is so extreme in the fact that you're going to burn, I'm not.
Hmm. Yeah,
You change your life the way I tell you to,
yeah,
or you'll burn because I'm not going to. I'm God's child. I mean, it's like go to hell. I mean, because it's him. It's
yeah.
him.
That's not
It's
good.
cowboys
Yeah,
like him that have done it. And the thing is
yeah,
that
yeah.
there need people now. We're not as educated as we were. We're not as learned as we were, and we don't read as well and all the rest of it like people did just in our recent past.
Hmm.
But people are more sensitive and also about the language being used. And we're using language which is from another time, slightly from another time. And it's
Hmm.
had at a time when Christianity wasn't doing what it should do. The
Just to
children's
say
tale,
about the cowboy. That's okay. So yeah, I think I mean, yeah, there's the kind of ridiculous creationism narrative he likes to promote, and then that's all a massive. I mean, it's kind of
it's
comedy, but then
disturbing.
it's tragic as well. But then also the point you made about him saying to other people, I'm okay, I choose to follow Jesus, therefore I'm fine. Whereas if you don't, then
He
you're
doesn't
going to
quite say
burn in
that.
hell.
Yeah.
That like I think that's a silly thing to say, because the idea of the religion is to ensure the salvation of every
Mm.
living soul. And so it's but by doing that, what you're trying to do is you're trying to save other people. You're trying to bring them into the fold, so that you can follow
And
Jesus together.
his show, his little
But he's not
show,
doing that, is he? He's doing a pretty
yeah,
poor
it's
quality version of that. Yeah,
the only people who enjoy it are like him, and they're all part of the
yeah.
same sort of thing. I mean, the children's home I was in, I
Mm-hmm.
was, if I'd been a decade earlier or 2 decades earlier in the 50s or 60s, if I'd been in there then, it was a hellhole. Because I look
Yeah,
up the
yeah,
name of the children's home, and there's so many people who have been trying to take them to court for what they went through as children, boys and girls. They never even used to let the kids outside. In those days, luckily for me, it was in the 70s where I spent a short period in there with my sisters, and it wasn't like that anymore. Thank God. I'm very, very lucky. But this is what the church represented, and maybe it's just television and films that are representing it in that way, and that may be that because most of our information we get everything's on films, and they are, you know, they've been
mm-hmm.
manipulated. I mean, when you're looking at the leader of the Church of England now, and some of the church leaders are complete twats, I'm hoping that they're going to be replaced with the new leaders, church leaders coming up, who
Yeah,
are going to be able to connect with people. And they're going to
yeah,
be
yeah, yeah.
more, because Christianity and the way of life used to be cool. It used to be a way of living a good, clean life and a healthy
Mm-hmm.
life. And I
I,
mean,
I, I do have to say though, just to chip in, I don't think that, say, the concepts of sin or the devil are wrong. I think they're pretty important and
oh,
integral
they are, no,
concepts.
they are very important, but they're not the only thing. The
Yeah,
trouble is, it's the only thing that's ever been on the menu for the last 150 years has been sin. It's time
I
to,
mean
open
it's
the other
completely
stuff.
integral to the religion and to drawing
Oh, it
you
is,
in.
yes,
But
yes, it is. And
yeah,
what,
it's
my
not the
God,
only thing that's part of it. Yeah, yeah.
well, most people don't realize evil is a thing. And people who do
Evil
evil, and there are,
absolutely is a thing. Yeah, yeah.
it certainly is. And I know this in my life where people I've met, and especially when I was a child in the hands of people who were like that.
Mm-hmm.
Evil is a thing, and it needs. And one of our problems is we're rewarding evil a lot of the times in our society because the person who's doing the evil often hides behind a veneer of victimhood,
Mm-hmm.
and they're quite happy to do that. Um, and so I'm not putting. I mean, from you bringing that up, you're right to, because it is thing. There was
Yeah.
years ago. There was a religious man, and he spoke on the radio, and he said, nobody's really talking about wickedness anymore, human wickedness onto
Mm-hmm.
others. I mean, you could have a church, an old lady in a traditional church who's a bigot and a gossip and a troublemaker and a false witness and everything else. And she goes, of course she goes to church, she's a good person. No, she's not. As soon as she pops a cork, straight to hell there where you belong, send you back. But this is the thing, and evil is flexible as well. Often the person who should be the good person is actually the one that's, it's just using a flag. But personally, I think that the language needs to change. Do you remember The Simpsons? And you have Flanders next door, the Christian, who's basically a soppy moron who's got his two sons. And Homer Simpson's taking advantage of him all the time because he's a silly loser. Well, I mean, and that's the other picture. Born-again Christians, they're so nice, you just want to laugh at them or throw a stone at them, you know.
I don't know about that, you know, like maybe a little, but I kind of like friendly people, and you know, so maybe there are some people who are, you know, maybe a bit fake with the image or something, and it's like it's too much. But you know, I do like the kind of the clean living, nice, happy Christian people.
Flanders, that guy, if that was his, I don't know if his name was Flanders, but the Simpson Christian next door to them had no common sense. And was everybody?
Yeah. I mean, like I don't know. You know, I'd say he's got some like negative traits and then some positive ones. He's obviously he's like really upbeat and joyous all the time, and really generous towards Homer. And it's like, well, should he be? Because you know, Homer seems to be taking the piss a little bit. He needs to belt.
Homer needs to punch in the head because the way he treats and uses the guy. I'll tell you one thing though, at Speaker's Corner, people might moan about some Muslims who are very rude in that. Some of the Christians can be just as rude. And some people feel that they've got God behind them, they can conduct themselves how they like. So it goes both ways on that thing. I mean, it's respect. It's such a, I mean, and one of the big things in the past, people could read better. They had a better understanding of the English language. And a lot of that comes from the fact, actually, Bible studies, because the Bible's quite hard to read. I find it hard to read. Now, if I was brought up in a stable environment.
There's different versions, but you know, it is pretty dense. Like it's not like reading a Stephen King book or something, you know.
No, I know. But the thing is, everything's become dumbed down and easy. The religious texts like that, it has different meanings from what I can guess, because I haven't really read it properly ever. But, you become quite educated by reading it over time, because your ability to read improves incredibly. And you've got ancient words that you've got to learn the meaning of it and then understand its context that it's in, which is really quite complicated.
Have you read a few bits of it, is it?
Oh, in the past I've tried to read it, but I haven't got into it. I mean, the Gulag Archipelago was another book I couldn't read properly because it was dense and difficult. But maybe if I'd read the Bible as a child, I'd be able to cope with it.
I'd recommend the Bible Project. It's a YouTube, YouTube channel, and they do short videos about each chapter of it. So it's pretty good for just finding out what happens in each chapter, and there's, you know, nice animation and stuff. So I'll just recommend that one, and I think that's pretty good.
The Bible Project.
Yeah.
Okay. I can't. I mean.
Go ahead.
Who's the Canadian? The great man. What's his name?
Jordan Peterson, is it?
The Canadian who Jordan Peterson. Yeah. I mean, I can't. I've joined you now, where I've been given a life ban from YouTube. So I've been completely thrown off YouTube.
Right.
For my comment, for many years of commenting on things. And
okay, so what?
They've ditched me.
I mean, I might like edit this out or something, but I mean, I don't know. Is it sort of because you know, I mean,
no, I just disagreed.
Oh, fair enough.
I disagreed with a lot of things they did.
And I put
on Jordan
Peterson
articulately as I could. Oh no, not about Jordan Peterson. I'm just saying I can't watch him on YouTube. I don't think he'd be on BitChute really. So if I
Yeah,
decide to
yeah,
go back on YouTube with an identity, but to be quite honest, I want to come off it and start, because I've been addicted to watching
yeah.
interesting YouTubes and BitChute for years, and I'm not doing as much as I should.
Sure, sure, yeah, yeah.
It makes you lazy. Or not, yeah, it probably does make you lazy.
No, fair enough. Yeah, no, it's good to do more productive stuff. Definitely. Yeah, I was just going to say, like the one other thing I wanted to kind of cover with you was so this basically I think that in the past what we saw was that you know, for most of our history as a Christian country, we've had pretty good birth rates. We've had pretty good marriage rates. There wasn't much divorce within the Christian system. It was more a system where young people would court each other and then would marry not long after, and that they would then marry for life. So not much divorce, and lots of children would then be raised within these families, and the children did pretty well, and you know that they grew up to be strong, healthy, moral adults, and everyone was part of the church community, and that
You
was
think
the thing
you're
that held
focusing
all of these communities together across the land, even though a lot of the other conditions that we were living in at the time were pretty terrible. And it seems that we've now lost this moral yardstick. We've thrown it away, and communities are breaking down, and we're seeing marriage rates are plummeting, divorce rates have skyrocketed, birth rates have fallen off a cliff, and celibacy as well is increasing. So yeah, I wanted to see what you made of all of that.
well. I think maybe you're focusing on some of the better families, or the more the families that were more stable. I don't know, because people didn't live as long then. People married because there wasn't much choice, and a man couldn't survive without a wife because he needed someone to look after him, and she couldn't survive without him because she needed someone to look after her. And when they got together and had children, then if he was to leave or she was to leave, they would be socially thrown out of society. Basically, they would not. They would lose all their respectability. I think a lot of people, the relationship between the man and the woman, even though it often probably was rocky, probably the only real excitement that they had, or warmth, if they didn't have good food, and that was probably sex in the married couple together. And people worked quite hard, so there weren't choices. And what they did have was basically the foundation of the family, which was him and her and the kids. And he had to work, she had to work, and the kids, and provide food and all the rest. They had to try and get food together. Looking at the hundreds of years of Christianity in Britain, I mean, they've had traumatic things happen, like when the people were drinking gin and all this alcohol, this crude alcohol was introduced into society, and society collapsed. There's been terrible times where people have been thrown off the land with the land clearances. And there's been many things, like with the Irish potato famine, and many other things where so men and women, to actually stay alive, they really needed each other, and they needed their families.
So you're just talking about,
and of course,
general living conditions were pretty bad
general
back
life,
in
general life would
medieval
like.
times. Yeah.
Well, we have choice now. See, I mean, a lot of feminist women, they wanted more out of life, which is, of course, so women should. But wanting to be the next Madonna, which is unlikely. I mean, because Madonna would have had contacts and all the rest of it, and she would have been just the right stuff to fit into that slot to make it. They were building a star. She did it. Only one can do that at that time. All these other people wanting to do it, and instead of focusing on their family and not valuing their family. In some Eastern countries in the Orient, A lot of people are like the poor people, as today are living on farms, and that a lot of them do a lot of creative stuff as well, dance, singing, making stuff. So they express themselves in other ways. But we almost, I mean, I look at myself. I wanted to escape. I could think of nothing more horrible when I was young than actually the traditional family. But that was because my family was not good. Now, if you came from a nice family, and people do, or, I mean, there's no perfect family, but a more reasonable family, you're going to be more keen to meet. But not only that, you're going to have your shit together, basically. You're not going to be a mess. Like when I was young, I had more or less PTSD. I had difficulty communicating and all sorts of things because of the mess that I'd come out of. A very awkward person. But if you come from a family that raises you up, I mean, that's what they say. They don't bring their children up; they throw them up, and that, you know, and maybe this is why also in the Western world with the Christianity. I mean, because the Victorians repaired a lot of old churches and made the churches really attractive with the arts and crafts. Really beautiful to get people back into church, I think. In the early 1900s, a lot of the vicars used to yell at their people because not many people were going to church. So it's been happening for a long time. And this is where I think...
I think
focusing on punishment.
Probably with the Industrial Revolution, you had more people going to the big cities then, and there was the rise in drinking culture from there, and you know, a lot of the other immoral vices that happened in the cities. And so when you took people away from a lot of their rural roots, then the church was it became less of a thing, and you started seeing more of a hedonistic society. And I think that feminism as well then came along in the 60s, and that promoted this it gave women the contraceptive you know, so it gave women the contraceptive pill, and also it gave them safe, effective abortion as well, so they could lead a much more hedonistic, sexually promiscuous life without becoming pregnant. And so then from there you see the rise in, you know, women and young men going to nightclubs, taking lots of drinking lots, taking lots of drugs, engaging in casual sex, and not actually, you know, the woman not actually becoming pregnant from that. But I think there's a problem of there's a problem of where that ends up in 5 years if you engage in that lifestyle, or in 10 years, because it, you know, it seems pretty good to start off with, but then over time it's not such a good lifestyle, and you don't really want to be doing that for, you know, your whole life. And there's a problem with women hitting the wall, and then they, you know, she can't attract the quality of men who she was attracting before. And there's also the problem of like women who are young and attractive, and they're getting all of the male attention, and then they're being quite judgmental in terms of only accepting, you know, the men with who are more sexually attractive, and also who have higher levels of sexual prowess. And so then I think from there you've got a system that reduces trust between the genders. And so in the old courtship system, that was a system that built up trust between men and women. And so you'd have the you know, the two young the couple that they would meet, they would go out for a you know, a coffee, and there would be lots of walks and talking, and that slow building up of trust in each other, and then marriage, and then children from there. But in the new hedonistic system, there's not that level of trust. Instead, it's you know, trying to get off with someone who you don't know down at a nightclub, and the guy trying to show all of this bradagio, and the woman showing off her assets and all of that. And it seems to me that it's just a lot more narcissistic, and as a system, it's much more of a failure than the old system.
But
And the old system works, the
the
new
thing is,
system not so much.
I mean, I think the pill made men more hedonistic as well.
Yeah,
And women
yeah,
were taught that men are hedonistic, when in fact, most men weren't. People had affairs, committed adultery, both men and women throughout
yeah.
have always done that. So there have been, this is where the church would say you shouldn't be doing that,
Mm,
um,
mm.
because of reasons. There are reasons why. But I think, I mean, you mentioned like the Industrial Revolution. It moved huge amounts of people because the farms used to have great huge populations working them. And of course, the industrial age came along and they didn't need so many people, and they wanted people in factories. That displaced a lot of people. And a lot of towns and cities, like immigration now, they didn't like all these other people from other parts of Britain who speak different going into their area. I think there was a lot of, that did a lot of damage to people having to being moved away. But also looking back to think that the countryside where they were working, I mean, a lot of those places would have been dire. They wouldn't have been very nice places to live often at times. They would have been cold. I mean, the romantic painters would paint a thatched cottage, but if you lived in there with all your relatives, it was cold, it had a lot of mice and stuff in it, and it was crowded and dirty, no proper toilets or anything. So when we look, you've got to be careful not to look back, in my opinion, and think everything was wonderful, when in fact, a lot of the times it wasn't. We now live easily twice the age of what people used to live.
Yeah. I mean, like, life was harder, and material conditions were worse. So I'm mainly
brief,
talking about the quality of gender relations, and I believe it was
yeah,
better as a result
it
of
might have been,
the
yeah,
like the old
there might have been more
religious
Jew,
system, and also the courtship
more
system
joy.
as
There
well.
might have been more joy. There might have been
Mm,
more
mm.
joy between people because the simpler things were more valued. Um, yeah,
And yeah, just the
it's
old
a
system
complex thing.
was based on trust, whereas the hedonistic system, it seems to me that it's not based on trust. And that's kind of why it fails, and why we're seeing so much more failure in terms of like lower marriage rates,
It was
lower
also
birth
based,
rates, and
for both partners, the husband and wife, it was based upon obedience to the family as
mm,
well,
mm.
men and women. Trust in a good relationship, yes. Repercussions for your behavior, for your actions, that could happen in society. It used to happen in society. So you'd either have to be very careful if you were wrongdoing, or lucky, or you'd be held accountable. They used to flog men and women in the old days, not that, and they stopped
Yeah,
flogging women
yeah.
first. People were flogged for their behavior. I mean, I mean, that's strange. I've seen some books. When I think of the past, I think of movies and things I've seen, and when they redo the past. But of course, that's probably not entirely true.
Hmm.
I think one of our problems is because we've been disconnected from our families,
Mm.
generations, we don't know who our grandparents are and stuff like that often. You don't really know what the past was like. And apart from, the best way to look at it appears to be looking at movies, because it's the easiest and it's fascinating and all the rest of it. But it might not be accurate. There's so many
Yeah,
things
yeah.
that might not be accurate that we think about with our past, either negative or positive. But that
Movies aren't
shouldn't be the
always the best
focus so
place
much. The
to
focus is
yeah, movies aren't always the best place
no.
to go. I'd recommend historical books, and
Reading probably a good author.
yeah,
A
yeah.
famous author would be better. Doesn't mean
Mm,
it's
mm.
perfect, but also, I mean, autobiographies on people's lives would be even
Sure.
better,
Yeah,
on how
yeah.
people lived at the time. But yeah, I think we're losing our privileges in the West,
Yeah, yeah.
um, and it may make us better people. Hopefully, it's not going to be like a lot of history has been.
Yeah. I mean, it's all looking fairly bleak as far as I can see. I would like people to return to Christianity, and I think it's been a really positive change for me. And I'd like to see other people come along. I don't. Would you be interested in trying it, or that was my final question?
If I can get the time to do it, I might have the time in the future when I haven't got this job anymore.
Mm.
I think I don't. I mean, I don't know many Christian leaders, but I think we need better Christian leaders as well, more realistic people with um, and maybe copy some of the like the Muslims and people like them a bit more, where they actually the community actually is in group preference and they help each other.
I mean, that's part of it, I
And
think.
the Jewish people as well.
Yeah,
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 that is the big part. That's the part that the church missed out on for so in recent history. I mean,
yeah.
did people really go to church in the 50s? More so, but see, church was always considered boring. My dad was an atheist, so we never went to church. The only time we
Yeah,
did
yeah.
was when we were in the children's home, and that was boring.
But when you
I was
went, you
always hoping to
thought it
go to
was
Sunday
boring, was
school.
it?
Well, it didn't make any sense to me, and it was boring.
Yeah.
But then again, that might have been my mindset, because what my father had told us about Christianity to don't take any notice, they're just silly. The
It's
guy
not the
who looked
best.
after our ward and the children.
Yeah, that's not the best mindset to be going
Oh,
into it
my
with.
family was my family could be described as being rather godless at times, and it would be
Right.
quite accurate. And certainly the people I was put the care of, they were godless. That's for sure. They were the
Mm.
devil's kids, the devil's people. But yeah, it's
Okay.
interesting. I think people are going to stop watching telly and listening to media and start going into and doing other things.
Okay,
Going
fair
to
enough.
church or meeting community.
Yeah, I agree, man. I agree. I think we need to get away from this, coronavirus crap and the woke religion and return to the real thing, to Christianity. Rod, thanks for your time.
Okay, you're welcome. Thank you.